The year of 2024 has officially come to an end, and alongside that also comes to an end the movie watching season. Hey guys, Caleb here from CDBS Studios, and 2024 has officially closed itself out, which means no new movies are coming out anymore for the year of 2024. 2024 was a very interesting year when it came to movies. We had some movies that were really, really good, a lot that were very mid, and then a bunch that were really bad. So today I'm going to go over my personal pick for my top 10 favorite movies from the year of 2024. A few disclaimers before we get started. I will admit I did not see every new film that came out last year. This is just a collection of the couple of my top 10 favorite films of the ones I did actually end up seeing. So I will say that. And this list, remember, is my own personal opinion. It's totally okay if one of these 10 movies is something that you absolutely despised. It just was my personal pick for my favorite. And I am basing this list solely on my enjoyment of the movie. Did it surprise me? Did I think it was good and did it surprise me? I'm not basing it on reviews or anything else. This is my own personal list. And if you disagree with my list, go ahead and leave your own ranking of your top 10 favorite films from last year in the comment section down below because I would love to see them. But without further ado, let's hop in to the ranking. Starting off the list at number 10 is Sonic the Hedgehog 3. It's very rare nowadays where we get a film franchise where every subsequent sequel is better than the previous movie. And Sonic 3 is absolutely follows that case, as this movie has everything I loved about the first two Sonic films. You got the comedy, the action, you got the great cast and all that. And it pairs it to make it even better, as you got the amazing cast. This film introduces us to get Jim Carrey playing two versions of Robotnik. You got Keanu Reeves as Shadow, and this movie in general is just such a good ride, as so much of it works on such an emotional level. As you got Maria's backstory, you got the everything they do with Tom in this movie, you got Sonic going through his emotional arc, and it all comes together to make probably one of my favorite films of the year, solely because it actually somewhat held together pretty well considering all the hype that it was getting. So however, Sonic, I can't really put it too much higher on the list because I don't think it's a perfect movie. I think there's some pacing issues, especially in the second act. And I think one or two characters are kind of underutilized and maybe could have been cut without any problems coming out. So it's not a perfect movie, but at the same time, I still put it at the bottom of my top 10 as my top 10 favorite movie of the year. At number 9, I have Beetlejuice. Beetlejuice is one of my favorite horror movies of all time. I think it's just really fun. It's comedic gold. The casting is amazing. And generally, it was one of my favorite horror movies growing up. So when I heard there was a sequel getting announced, I was kind of on the fence of, I don't think it needed a sequel, and I was kind of on the fence about, am I going to watch it, am I not? I did end up seeing it, and I was genuinely surprised. It was a pretty faithful sequel. They brought most of the original cast back, which is always a standout, and the new cast that they bring in are really, really captivating. Jenna Ortega is amazing as the new main character. You have Willem Dafoe in there as this film cop who is probably my favorite character in the movie. The fact that Willem Dafoe was not in one of the previous movie feels like a crime because he just fits the world so well. And across the rest of the cast, you got Winona Ryder, who is doing an amazing job as now a grown-up Lydia. You got Michael Keane, who easily steps back into that role of Beetlejuice. This film was so fun, and I was genuinely surprised with it. A couple of points, though, that do bring it down and why I don't really put it too much higher on my top 10 is you have a couple of subplots in there that I don't think really fit that well. I think there's this whole subplot with the dad that doesn't really go anywhere. I think the villain that they use for this movie of like Beetlejuice's ex-lover is kind of not the most interesting character. In fact, she's not even in 75% of the movie, so it also makes it kind of awkward when she turns out to be the main villain. And there's some other plot points here and there that I think are a little clunky, but overall, I really, really enjoyed this movie, and it has taken the number 9 spot for one of my favorite movies of last year. At number 8, I have Challengers. This was the Zendaya tennis movie that released last year, and I really, really enjoyed this movie. I am the kind of person that doesn't really enjoy sports movies all that much. I think that sometimes they're really predictable, they're really kind of meh, as I don't think they're the best stories ever told. But Challengers actually really surprised me. It uses this really cool framing device of we are watching a game in the present and we are flashing back during each of the different sets, and we end up seeing kind of the story of how we got there, which is a really cool idea for the story. You have the characters are all really cool and you slowly get to learn about each of them, and it kind of helps fill in the backstories, and in a way the film's told out of order, and that's in its favor because it allows you to, while you're watching, theorize about what does this mean? What is this character's relationship? And it all comes together pretty well for the finale. The reason why I have had to knock it down a couple of spots is I do think the film, I was ready for it to be over about 30 minutes before it was, because once we get into that final set and it jumps back to fill in the last couple pieces of the story, I think that they could have maybe cut a couple of that out because it does kind of drag in that section. But the ending more or less makes up for it. So this movie is one of my favorites from last year, and it's shocking because I'm usually not a fan of sports movies. So that means this film did something right if it was able to entertain me this much. At number 7, I have Furiosa, a Mad Max saga. I remember my first exposure to Mad Max Fury Road. It was in the glorious year of 2024. Yeah, my first experience of Mad Max was this year. But in all fairness, I actually think it might have helped me enjoy Furiosa a little more because I got to watch Mad Max in preparation for Furiosa, meaning that it was very close in watchings, which also probably helped carry over because it means all the questions I had from Fury Road were instantly answered and also meant that I knew what to expect going in. But this movie was really, really enjoyable as Furiosa has everything I loved about Fury Road. You got the big action set pieces, the amazing character arcs. You got some really interesting villains. Chris Hemsworth is amazing as the main villain, and you got the little things in there that the problem that this movie could have so easily fallen into, which is a problem um most prequel movies end up, is they answer questions that you didn't really know you had, or they answer them in a really dumb way. Like I was totally expecting going in this movie that they were going to answer Furiosa losing one of her arms as a really dumb way, but no, it was actually kind of interesting of an idea. And I love how the ending of the film kind of leads almost right under Fury Road. Like you could probably watch Furiosa and then Fury Road right after, and it just really nicely flows into one another. That's kind of nice, and that's another reason I like some other prequel films like Rogue One, for instance. So I really enjoyed Furiosa for a lot of different reasons. It has everything I loved about the other film, and while it's probably not as good as the original film, and also why it's not higher on this list, is it does have some pacing issues, especially during the beginning, I noticed. But other than that, the ending more than less makes up for. In fact, the second act more than makes up for that kind of slow beginning. So this movie is one of those that's kind of a crescendo, and it works so well, and it takes the number 7 spot for my favorite movie of one of my favorite movies of 2024. At number 6, I have Gladiator 2. Once again, I remember my first exposure to Gladiator, which was in the glorious year of 2024. I unfortunately have not seen the original Gladiator until very briefly before seeing this sequel, so I didn't have that built up nostalgia going into it. But again, Gladiator is one of the best movies ever made. In fact, while watching it, I was honestly mad at myself for not watching it earlier. But Gladiator 2 was so good as it was a sequel to the original, but it didn't do anything that I really feel like contradicted the original, as it's kind of telling its own little story. It's got this really amazing cast in there that it just does all the way. You got the main character, you got Pedro Pascal, you got Joseph Quinn. You got so much in this movie that works so well, and that is so good because the first movie is such a phenomenal masterpiece that I was honestly pretty sure this movie was not going to be able to top it in any way, shape, or form. But it did, and it did have a lot of great things about the movie that made me really love Gladiator 2. In fact, this is probably one of my favorite movie experiences I had all year. But but I can't put it too much higher because I think the top 5 films for this year were just a little bit stronger for me personally, so I have had to knock Gladiator 2 down a couple of spots. But this movie for a long time was actually sitting in around my top spots, and then I watched a couple other movies at the end of the year that kind of took over some of the top of the list. So Gladiator 2, great job at number 6, but you just unfortunately did not beat my number 5 pick, which is probably where you were sitting for a good couple of weeks. At number 5, I have Wicked. Now, I will be completely honest, I have never actually seen the original Wicked stage show, but I was like aware of the generic plot. I knew roughly what it was about, and I've even listened to a couple of songs. So seeing this movie was really, really cool because I finally got the chance to experience this show that I have been wanting to see forever. And as a theater kid, of course, I loved so much about this movie from like the theater making standpoint and the technical aspects of it. And this movie, just in general, does such a good job of bringing this stage show to life. And it really is so good of a film that I've even seen people who aren't theater kids, or I even took my friends to see this movie who weren't theater kids, and they loved it. So Wicked just somehow does something right that it's able to bring in all these new audience members and they instantly love the show. That's just so great about this movie. And the filmmaking about it is just so cool. The composition, the sets, the costumes, the songs, the casting, it all comes together to make such a good film that I enjoyed from the first second it started until the very end credits started rolling. This film is such a good package overall, and it was such a good experience in the theater. Unfortunately, it even though how great Wicked is, it does not totally beat everything as it does have a couple problems here and there. One thing I do know that this film is actually weirdly this film is only act 1 of the play, but it's somehow longer than the entire play itself. And in a couple of times, you can kind of feel that they did drag out certain dialogue scenes or certain songs just to make the movie a little longer, just to kind of fit all those pieces. But it does make up for it because even though that's the case, I didn't feel it every time that I heard it was happening. It kind of just felt natural. So this movie is a pretty good package and totally worth it if you have not seen it. Even if you don't know the original Wicked story or are not a theater kid, I would totally recommend it. At number 4, I have Inside Out 2. This was another movie that genuinely surprised me this year as the first Inside Out I already held in such a high regard as it used all of these as it kind of told this amazing story about growing up and how our emotions are important and kind of all of these different aspects that made it such an enjoyable film. And Inside Out 2, I was expecting not to relate to in the slightest, as you had Riley now being a teenager and kind of all these other things that I didn't think I was going to be able to connect to. But this movie proved me wrong, as it somehow found a way to really make you see yourself on Riley and all of these different emotions, and you see how each one is kind of important in their own ways. Although anxiety is the villain of the movie, anxiety in a couple of cases is shown to be good. Like it's not inherently bad, it's just when it takes over fully. You got things like envy and embarrassment. Like they're not bad emotions. It's just when they take full control that things start to get bad. You got the fun adventure, you got the emotions. Everything about this movie surprised me, and it was such a good movie. In fact, this movie probably for the longest time was one of my highest movies of the year. But unfortunately, in this back half of the year, I did get the chance to go back and watch a couple other movies that I did not get to see, which kind of beat it out, unfortunately. So Inside Out 2 is not higher than number 4, which is unfortunate. But as it stands, Inside Out 2 was one of my favorite movies of this year because it genuinely surprised me. And even when I've gone back to rewatch it, as I've taken new groups of people to go see it, I've enjoyed it more and more and more. So Inside Out 2 takes the number 4 spot on my list. At number 3, I have Dune Part 2. Now, the first Dune movie is just such an interesting masterpiece of filmmaking. You got some great composition, the shots, you got the costumes, the sets, the casting. It all came together to probably make one of my favorite movies of the year it released. I forget what year that was. And when going into this movie, I was not expecting to be blown away, and I was. This movie is everything I loved about the original and more. You have pretty much, I think everything that I had a criticism on in the first film was improved for the second film. And in fact, the second film is probably one of the few films all year that I had genuinely no notes for, which is shocking because I was totally expecting to walk out of this film with multiple notes. So, Dune Part 2 is just such a good film. And if Dune Part 3 or whatever they end up doing with the Dune franchise can continue this masterpiece, this franchise might become one of the best in Hollywood because honestly, it's off to a great start. But it doesn't beat the top 2 films, mainly due to the fact that I think the other top 2 films that I think I enjoyed the emotions of the top 2 films a little bit better, so they do beat Dune, unfortunately. But as it stands, this movie is phenomenal, and if you have not gotten the chance to check it out, I would totally recommend it if you can find it because it is so worth it because everything from the first second of the film to the credits rolling was a phenomenal piece of art. And honestly, like I said back when I originally reviewed Spider-Verse, the second one at least, the worst part about this movie was the ending. Not because it was bad, but because the movie was over and I had to stop watching it. And I didn't want to stop watching it. So good job, Dune Part 2. At number 2, I have The Wild Robot, the DreamWorks film that came out of nowhere and surprised literally everyone. Walking out of The Wild Robot, I don't think there is a single thing about this movie I disliked, as everything from the animation to the music to the characters to the story to the emotions in it, all of it came together in a way I was not expecting. As for a long time now, I have seen DreamWorks as kind of one of those studios that is one of the biggest hit or miss kind of studios where most of those movies, especially in recent years, I've either hated with all my guts or I have like actually really enjoyed. And Wild Robot came in and just totally took me away. In fact, this is one of the few films this year where I feel like I cried during the film, and that's really hard to get me to do. So this film was doing something right in the writer's room. In fact, this was doing everything right. This is another film, like I said, that I think I walked out of the theater with little to no notes. It was just that good of a movie. And this is another one that I would totally recommend that if you did not get the chance to see last year for whatever reason, find a way to watch it because it is so worth it. And if I had to be honest, if we're talking from a technical standpoint and from a technical standpoint and all of that kind of stuff, this is probably the best film of the year technically, as I don't think there's any other film that tops this when it comes to the technical aspects. I just unfortunately, my number one movie is my favorite movie of the year, and even though it might not be the best filmmaking wise, I still loved it with every fiber of my being. So why don't we get into it so I can talk about it a little more? Coming in at number 1, I have to go with Deadpool and Wolverine. This movie was everything I've been wanting out of a Marvel movie for the last couple of years, as this movie was not only another Deadpool movie or another X movie, it was a tribute movie, as in recent years, I've always seen people kind of in a way forget that the Fox films even happened. Like, sure, the Fantastic Four films and the X-Men films, even some things like the Daredevil and Elektra films, were not the greatest superhero movies of all time, but that doesn't mean that they should be forgotten. As while these movies might not have been top-tier filmmaking, they still hold special places in some of our hearts, and this movie really reminded me why I enjoyed those movies. And this movie is a comedy is just a comedic romp as well. I feel like every joke in this movie I either laughed at or I at least chuckled at, which was so funny. In fact, I went to see this movie with a ton of my friends, and we all had probably one of the best theater experiences ever. This movie was an experience, and in fact, seeing it in theaters was probably the best theater experience I had all year, and probably my favorite movie of year for that exact reason, as because I don't think any other film this year took me away the way Deadpool and Wolverine is. Like I mentioned, it's maybe not the strongest when it comes to the story and the characters and some of that other jazz you expect from like a top tier film, but I enjoyed this film more than any other film this year. In fact, it's probably one of my most rewatched films from this year. So, and we've only gone like half a year since it first came out. That's how you know you created an emotional experience. And in fact, this movie is my favorite movie of the year for so many reasons, and that's why it takes the number 1 spot for my favorite movie of 2024. So there you guys have it. That is my ranking for my top 10 favorite films from 2024. If you guys enjoyed the video and want to see more, make sure to leave a like and subscribe down below so you don't miss the next one. And once again, this is my own personal list. If you don't agree with my picks, go ahead and leave yours down in the comment section down below. I would love to see yours. And I also wanted to call out that this is the first of a 2-part series. I went over my favorite movies of 2024. In my next video, which will be releasing in a couple of days, I will go over my most anticipated movies for 2025. And once that happens, we will finally be able to roll into the new movie season, and I can start talking about some of the new movies when they release, and even rank some of the old movies that will be posted in a poll on my community tab. So make sure you're checking that. But without further ado, thank you guys all very much for watching this video, and I hope to see you guys all in the next one.
Bye, guys.